Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and show you something very quickly today, how to solve some of the problems that happen when you are making a panorama. Most software seems to create a number of distortions, and most people I know don't really deal with that. They just crop the clean bit out of whatever the distortion is that has happened, if there's a curve and so on. Sometimes I will straighten it out, but I want to show you how to do this in a really nice way, I think with a nice result. Let's get going. And I've got a nice example here, I think. A little church which I shot in a small town. From 3 pictures I put this together and got a typical distortion effect. I'd like to show you how we solve that, and a couple of tricks that I think a lot of profies don't want you to know about. Let's get going. Alright, here you can see that I've got a nice little bit of distortion going on. Look at these lines at the top and the side. Well, the usual thing to do is, of course, to bring these sides out. I like to do it this way. Take my small selection tool here, and I'll run down the side this way, I think quickly enough, though, across to here, to here. I'll select basically the edges. Right, once that's done, over to the transform tool. First of all, I think because it's a straightforward one, we'll just use perspective. If we have a look at that, pull that out to the sides, look at what's happened here. Now, we're at the sides about there, but what's happened? Our church is now small and fat. We want to bring that back up, but not a long way. So I'll bring it up a little bit. Transform again, scale tool. We'll pull that up a little bit in here. Now we're going to lose some of that image. So instead of doing that, we'll save that transformation first of all. And change our boundaries. Now, the selection tool, I think we want to get that. Here it is unconstrained. I will go up to here. I think that's probably going to be okay. Right. Okay, back to our basic selection. Something like this. Where is it? Here it is. I'll just take that. That's all right. Don't have to be too particular here. Right, we've selected that again. Now, how are we going to sort this out? I could pull the middle up. Let's see what happens if I do that. Now, if I just want the middle, I'm going to use the warp tool, and that won't change too many things, but we're going to get our height back. We may have to look and see that this building is in fact straight as it's supposed to be, but I think that's pretty good. And we can do the same thing at the bottom. Pull that back down to there, and we've basically solved that problem. If we have a bit of a closer look, I think we can find there's a missing bit down there. That's not really critical right now. Okay, but it's still not ideal. Apply the transformation. If I were to keep pulling that up in the middle, we're going to add quite a lot of distortion. So I think we'll try another method now, and that is to select only part of it. Let's select the top without including the church, and therefore we won't damage that any further. Now at this point I usually like to add another layer, so we're going to copy and paste that on there. So we've actually got a second layer. It shouldn't move. Working with the second layer and back to our distortion tool. Here we go, we're going to warp that. Once again, take the middle portion, he said, and pull that up. We're going to end up cropping off stuff we don't really need here. We may have to pull these corners out a little bit as well. Let's pull those up, and this one. That looks pretty good to me. Apply the transformation. And we'll flatten those layers again. Now have a look at what else is happening here. These trees leaning way in, I would like to straighten them. This one has a bit of a curve going on, and I'm not so happy with the way this set of buildings runs out on a diagonal here. So now we'll select the left portion, again without including the church. We don't want to distort that. Copy, paste, and let's pull out the left side a little bit. Again, I'll use the warp tool. Wait for it. A little bit more here. I don't usually like to touch the ones on this edge, because then we're going to get into trouble if we do that. Pull that one out a little bit, that one out a little bit, this one out a little bit, and we can take that one out. This one, this one. Now you can see we're moving out over here, and I don't really want to do that, so let's see what happens if can we pull this one in just a little bit. This one out just a little bit more. We could go all the way out. Now there's going to be a little bit of pixel distortion in the end here. We don't want too much of that. Be very careful, that could shift the other side. So, fairly happy with that. And we'll have a look and see if we've screwed anything up unnecessarily. Apply the transformation. And we'll have a look at the change. That looks pretty good to me. Okay. You can flatten that down again. Select the other side. Copy it, paste it. Same procedure. Warp tool again. Usually the most effective here. Let's just pull that out over here. Little by little, until you are basically satisfied that the tree is straight enough. We're going to use a small curve here, which we can also correct. Just a little pull here, and maybe a small pull on this one here. Don't overdo these things. Looking pretty good. Okay. Apply the transformation once again. before and after. I think that looks pretty good. Right, we've still got a few issues at the top. Lightning. How are we going to deal with that? There is another solution. Let's just try this one now and see what happens. Feather on 0 once again. Let's just see if we can use content aware fill to solve what happened here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You don't have to do this, depends on the crop that you're after. Alright, let's just do the fill mode, content aware, normal. Let's go. Check that out. It could do with a little bit of tidying up, but that looks pretty impressive to me. So we'll keep that. Now, are we satisfied with everything else? I would like to move this down a tiny bit on the side. Let's have a look if we can do that without messing up the rest once again. Do a small selection here, to here, and down to here. Actually, I'm doing this a little bit too roughly, I think, but for this video it will be enough to give you the idea. If we use these other modes, by the way, it will distort the left, so I tend to prefer the warp tool once again, going down first of all here, and a little here, not quite as much here. I think we can still straighten that out a little bit. That's a tiny bit more. And here. And maybe here. And once more down here. You might not like the curve that appeared in the middle. I think we can get away with that up here. Look at that, it's actually disturbing it too much. So I'll take a little bit here, a little bit back here. Apply the transformation. Now, because we're working with layers, if necessary, we can fix, you can see, if we look very closely, we've actually disturbed this a little bit up here. So let's have a look at that with a mask. Bloody hell. Brush, soft brush. What size are we on here? 1000. It's a little bit big. Let's drop that down a tiny bit. Opacity, black on here, and we'll reveal what was below it. That's fine. You can still see there are some little issues going on here. We'll get to that again shortly. Flatten the image. Are we satisfied with this yet? I'm not totally satisfied with it, quite apart from the fact that we've got a bit of rubbish in the bushes. How are we going to get rid of that? It's pretty easy as well. Take that tool there. Increase the size a little bit. Run around the edges first and then fill in the middle. And it has disappeared, I think, quite effectively. We've got some further distance. This is straight, this isn't. Let me have a look at that. Take another small selection, just this small area here will probably do. Copy, paste. So this is what I tend to do. Eventually small areas, step by step. There are, of course, other ways to do this. I might have to show you that another day. Now what's happening here is we're just pulling out the top portion and then back the lower portion until we are satisfied with that. I'm actually lining up with the layer below, but I think we can live with that as well. That's pretty cool. Flatten it. We've actually ended up duplicating a few things down here, and if you want to, you can get rid of that too in the same method. Just use the content aware tool, brush away some of those things, and that looks fine to me. Next thing to do is to check that it is vertical in the middle, which is where it really matters, and I think we've got that pretty much straight on. That looks good to me. I use these guidelines very, very often. I'm looking at proportions of a building. If I don't like the proportions very much, I may actually use some further distortions to look at that. Is the building in the middle? Next question. Actually it is. My daughter used to say whenever we drove through a village, oh look, the church is in the middle. We don't need these guidelines. We can take them off. Another thing I'm interested in sometimes is the horizon line. Around about 1/3 is really most effective. That's about it, folks. The other thing that I may end up doing, usually do, by the way, another small point. 4x5 works best for social media, I find. If you want, it's a nice format, 4x5, look at that. We've pretty much got our thirds down there. We can still come down a little bit if we want to. And that gives us a slightly better crop. We could go all the way down to here. Gives us a nice focus. Let's do that. And voila, I think the image is finished. There are lots of other things one can do to this. Something I might bring you to another day is what happens, and we don't really have this problem here, but zooming right in, sometimes you'll get halos around some of these edges, depending on what you've done to pre-process, can cause a few problems. This image is not finished. There are a number of other things that I would do to it, but basically that's it for now. The key is the selection when you stretch and warp the sides, the middle, the high points. Be very careful not to disturb other areas. That's why I tend to make a selection down one side and not overlapping the areas that I want to disturb, that I don't want to disturb. Use the outer points for distortion correction and not the inner points. Do it in layers, flatten the layer, make sure that you haven't disturbed anything in the middle by turning it off and on, flatten it, then move on to another area. Stretching things out if necessary, or using the fill mode for the unfinished areas. There's lots of ways to fix that. Maybe I'll show you those in another video. This is really just a short, rather spontaneous look at these things, because a number of people have been asking me if I can show them how I do certain things. There's not really any magic to it. A lot of this is just trial and error, and I've figured out this way or that way, and if you've got a better way to do something like this, you can let me know. Newer versions of Lightroom and Photoshop can handle this quite well. Panoramas, I still use the Photoshop method for that. It often doesn't work. There are a number of alternatives. One I like to use, a free one, is a free one from Microsoft. Microsoft make a thing called ICE, Image Composite Editor. It's very fast, very, very good, but you still often end up with small corrections that you have to do. But that's what you'll get with most of the software anyway. That's all for now. Thank you very much. Over and out. Kaboom. I wonder if they got it. I have no idea. I talk too much. I have to find another way to solve this problem, don't I? Right,